Alright, so welcome to a new guide on this channel, and this occasion is the OBEHRHAUSEN from Brainworks. Now this is not a review, it's a deep dive guide about this synth. Now everything on this guide is in chapters, so if you look at the description or the timeline, you can jump to a section or skip the ones you don't want. If you like this guide, please like and subscribe, and if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee, you can. Just check the links at the description. Right, so let's just begin. Now, this synth looks simple, but it's quite powerful. Now, they modeled the OBEHRHAUSEN SEM, a classic synthesizer. It's still, it's very different because we, it goes way deeper. We have multiple voices, Unison effects, we have an ARP, and we have a mod matrix that you don't see. So you have a lot of things hidden from you. So it looks simple, but we have a lot of features. And we're going to go through all of them one by one. Right, so let's start with the VCOs. It starts easy. So we have the VCO1 and the second VCO. If I play something, we have an init patch first. If you go to favorites, you have the init. We're going to always start from there. If I play something, it's just going to be playing. So you have the VCO playing. So right here, you can choose the frequency for the VCO. You can go up in semitones, up to 24, and you can go down. And I know that all of this is just pretty obvious, but we need to cover this. Now, right here, you can go in sense, up or down. Now, sometimes it's a little bit hard to control it with the mouse. You can do shift, and while you're holding shift, if you move it, you can go in, you can fine tune this one, right? So now let me just control and click, and it's going to go back to the default position. Now, the thing is that, this is very simple. Now, you have your frequency and your fine tune, but the thing is that from where can we hear the VCOs? Right now, this one is enabled, but this one is not. So how can we enable this one? So right here at the bottom on this section, this is where we enable and disable the VCOs and where we select the different waveforms. And with this synthesizer, we only have two different waveforms. We have a saw and we have a pulse. So with this control, if we are standing on the VCO, if we go all the way to saw, we're going to get saw. And as soon as I go towards the center, we're going to start to get nothing. And it's because the center point right here, center, is just nothing. Now, as I go to the other side, we're going to start getting a pulse. So you get a saw, pretty much nothing, and a saw. That's what you get. So since the number 2 is on nothing, we are going to be getting nothing. So we need to, I'm going to go center in this one. We need to go here, and now we're going to be listening to the VCO2. So if we change the frequency, we can hear that it's the VCO2. And if we want both at the same time, we're going to be doing something like that. And we can change the frequency of this, and we have both VCOs. Right, so we're going to go back to an init patch, and we're going to stand on the VCO1. And we already know how to change this saw to a pulse. In this case, I'm going to go to a pulse. And it's because we can do pulse width modulation, and we can adjust the width of the pulse. So right now, we have just the pulse. So if you go all the way at the bottom, you skip this part. We're going to talk about this in a minute. If you go all the way to the bottom, you're going to see something that says pulse width. So if you're standing on a pulse, you can go to the left. It's going to be narrow, and if you go to the right, it's going to be wide. Now, then you have other controls right here, like the spread and the FM and everything else, but we're going to be talking about this in a minute because they belong to the modulation section. And this is how this synth, it's layered. You have, the VCOs, and on the same section, you have the modulation and, all the other things like frequency modulation and the sync and something called spread that we're going to talk about later. So everything is like mixed on the same place. But still, this is how you can manually adjust the width. Now later we're going to do it with the LFO and the envelope, but right now we can do it manually on both oscillators. So back to a default patch, we're going to move on to the next section, which is going to be the envelope 1. Now the envelope 1 is going to be the amp. This is the one that controls the volume that goes out of the synthesizer. So if I play something, we are just, listening to the VCO number 1. So this one, it's controlling the out. If I go sustain all the way down, we get a click. Nothing, because the envelope controls the volume that goes out, and right now it's super close. So we have attack, decays, and sustain. Maybe you already know how an envelope works on a synthesizer. Maybe you don't. I'm going to give you a quick explanation. So this one will control, again, how the sound goes out, and you have different times. The attack is going to be how long it's going to take to go up in volume. So and this one is going to be in milliseconds. This one is going to be in milliseconds, but the sustain is a value, right? We're going to talk about this in a second. So if I play something, we get nothing. We get a click. So the attack is going to decide how long it's going to take to go up to full amplitude. So we are going to be around 1 second. So it's going to take 1 second to go up. Now I'm holding a key right now, pressing, and I'm still holding the key and the sound, it's dying. And this is because we decided how much it's going to take, how long it's going to take to go up to full volume, but we are not deciding how long it's going to take to go down to full silence. And right now it's super aggressive because this is going to be the decay job. So right now the decay is 0, so it's going really fast. Now, if I go up and decide that it's going to take like 6 seconds or something like that, I'm going to play it, it's going to go up, and then it's going to take some time and it smoothly go out in silence, in volume. And I'm still holding a key. So that's it. That's how an envelope works. The attack decides how long it's going to take to go up, and the decay how long it's going to take to go down, even if we are holding a key. Now, the sustain, it's a level control. It works on dBs in this case, and the other ones, they work with time, with seconds or milliseconds. Now, the sustain, what it does, if I'm sustaining a key like I'm doing right now, it's going to tell the envelope that we need to hold the volume at some point. So if I go down up a little bit, the sound is going to go up, it's going to go down to the decay stage, but then it's not going to go to full silence. It's going to stop or going to be stuck on the sustain because we are telling, dude, you need to sustain right there because we are holding a key. So with this value, you can just go and just move it around until you get to whatever volume you want right here. Now, one thing that you need to be aware is that you go all the way up on the sustain. What you do, you disable the decay stage pretty much. Now, still, in this case, it's going down when we release a key because it's listening to decay. And this is something that you get on some synthesizers. You get an envelope with an attack, a decay, a sustain, and you have a release. It's the famous ADSR. So the release means that when you what's going to happen when you release a key, and it's a time-based knob. So usually, if I play a key and I'm going all the way up on the sustain, right? So it's holding right there. What's going to happen when we release the key? I'm going to release it, and it dies right away. So in this case, this synthesizer uses the decay as a release value. So if I play something, it goes up, and when we release the key in 3, 2, 1, it dies instantly because we have no decay. But if I do something, now if I play it right now, it's going to go up. There's no decay because the sustain is all the way up. And as soon as I release the key, instead of going to full silence right away, it's going to take a little bit of time, which is going to be decided by the decay. Right, so this is how the envelope works on a nutshell. And this is the amp envelope and controls the volume that goes out. Okay, so let's just keep moving forward. I know that this was a little bit too basic if you have, some experience with the synthesizers, but maybe this is your first synthesizer and you're learning. So now you know how an envelope works. So now the next thing that we need to talk about, we need to go all the way up right here. We need to talk about the pitch modulation, which is going to be this one, and we need to talk about the pulse width modulation. So this is the section right here. If you're standing right in the middle, it means that you're doing nothing. And for now, just going to go to an init patch. So you need to decide what are you going to be doing. You're going to be doing frequency modulation, which is going to be modulating this in some fashion, or you're going to be doing pulse width modulation. So first, I'm going to go all the way to frequency modulation. And notice it's doing something already. So this is going to be use an instruction to decide how to modulate the pitch, this knob. And right here at the bottom, you can choose which control or modulation source you can use. Now, in this case, it's using by default the envelope 1, which is this one. Now, if I do something to this and change the values, we can notice that there is some kind of a modulation. We are modulating the pitch. And the main instruction is going to be the envelope 1. So now the envelope 1 is controlling how the volume goes out, but it's also modulating the pitch of the VCO1. So what is the other way? Well, we have an LFO, and it's going to be the LFO1. So the LFO1 is right here, and you have no saying in which waveform you can use. You have the LFO2. We're going to talk about this much later when we reach the matrix. But right now, you cannot use it from the main panel. You need to use it from the matrix. Now, the LFO1 is just pretty basic. It's just a sine wave, right? It's just a sine wave. And the only thing you can do right here, you can decide how fast it's going to go, and it's going to go in hertz in this case. So if I play something, we can see that this one, the LFO1, is doing frequency modulation. It's modulating the frequency, something like this, for example. And it's the rate, how fast it goes. It's decided by the LFO1. We can go slow, or we can go all the way fast. Right. So that's how it works. Now, if you go to none, of course you're gonna get none. Now, the other thing is going to be the pulse width modulation, and this got to do with the pulse width. Now, if I play something and we are using the envelope 1, notice that nothing happens. And if I change this or go to an LFO, nothing happens. And it's because whenever you work with a saw, you cannot modulate the pulse width because it's a pulse. So you need to be on pulse on this oscillator in order to do some pulse width modulation. So if I play something, notice that we get something, and you need to learn how to control it. Now, the envelope 1 is doing that modulation. So we cannot hear what is happening because it's super fast. Now, I'm going to be changing some of the pulse width modulation, and we can see it now. So we need to decide right here how much are we going to be doing, because we are using the envelope, which is a single pop instruction, and how this is going to be modulated. And right here we can see on the oscilloscope that when we play a key, the pulse, the pulse, let me make it just shorter, is just growing when we play a key. If there's no modulation, we just don't get that, right? You can go slower, and you can go to the other way, and just fine-tune your pulse width modulation. Now, in this case, we are using an envelope, but we can use an LFO. So if we're going to go to an LFO, it's just the same principle. How fast you're going to be modulating this, how much you're going to be modulating this, it's going to be really aggressive, and then you just can decide your initial pulse width right here. And it's just going to go and do it. Now, I'm going to go back to init, and there's a tiny difference between the VCO1 and the VCO2. Now, the 2 can do pulse width modulation, is the same deal, but the difference is that this one is going to be using the envelope number 2. Still is using the LFO number 1, but in terms of envelopes, it's using the number 2, this one. Now, this envelope is just completely equal to the one we have right here, but this one, it's tied to the filters, to modulate the filters. We're going to talk about this in a second. So you could do pulse width modulation or frequency modulation and have two completely different envelopes on modulating the frequency right here. Same thing, with the pulse width. So I was going to go to the VCF, to the filter, but maybe just covering this and getting it out of the way, it's just a little bit better. So what you can do on this synthesizer, you can do FM. Now, this is not the classic FM that you would get with, DX7 or something like that. It's just a different thing. But what happens right here, when you enable this, the VCO number 2 will frequency modulate the VCO number 1. And right here, we can decide how much we want to do. Now, if the VCO number 2 is all the way in nothing, right, it's silent, nothing is going to happen. Even though we go, if we go all the way up or the way down, we start changing things, nothing is going to happen because this one is doing nothing. So we need to do something on this one in order to get that FM. If I go all the way to the saw, now the VCO number 2 is a saw. So we're going to start to get that, sound. Now, if I modulate the amount, it's going to be a little bit more pleasing. And we get it, we start to get it. And we can go to the other direction. And right here, part of the magic happens when you start to offset the oscillators. Right, so that's how you do FM. Now, right here you can just narrow this and make it a little bit more pleasing, or you can go all the way up and enter in that territory. Now, pretty simple to understand. I'm going to turn it off. This is the FM. Now, we need to talk about the sync. Now, maybe you don't know what sync is, and it's a little bit hard to explain just with words. So what happens is that this the VCO number 1 is going to be the master, and the VCO is going to be the slave. That's usually the main definition when we talk about sync. So when this one is playing, whatever this one is doing, the VCO is going to be forced to restart to the VCO1. So if we start to detune, the VCO number 2 is always going to try to restart its frequency, its phase, to be aligned with the VCO number 2. So we cannot really detune it because it's a slave of the number 1. So the thing is that when we do sync, this is going to give you that classic sync sound. So let me just show you how this works. I'm going to be doing sync on. So if I play something, and first, I'm going to go to an init patch so we can start all from the same place. If I play something and I go to sync, nothing happens. And if I move this, nothing happens, all right? So we need to have something right here. In this case, I'm going to go to a pulse. Now, the cool thing with sync is that when you start offsetting and you do different things on the both oscillators, you're going to get a cool sound. If you're doing always the same, you're just not going to get a cool sync sound. So right now we get that, which is maybe not that cool. So as soon as I go into frequency and I go up, we're going to start to get that frequency. But notice that I'm detuning by 17 semitones, and it doesn't sound detuned. It's giving you that sync sound, but it's just not detuned. Now, sync also sounds really cool when you modulate the frequency. And we can modulate the frequency. I'm going to go to modulation and do frequency modulation. And remember, we can use the envelope number 2, which is going to be this one. So maybe I'm going to go all the way up. And as soon as you do something like that, is modulating the frequency in some fashion with the envelope number 2. So since this one cannot go out of tune, we are going to be getting that hard sync sound, right? So just a classic hard sync sound. Now, the only thing that you need to remember is that when you do sync, the magic starts to happen when you start to offset the master, the slave from the master. And now when you change the master one, everything is going to be changing because this one, remember, is the slave. So it's going to be following whatever the VCO number 1 is doing. Right. So this is how, sync works in a nutshell. I'm going to go back to an init patch, and we're going to keep moving forward, and we need to talk about the VCF. Right, so the VCF, it's the filter. Now, we're going to be chopping frequencies, but in this case, with this synthesizer, you can do a lot more than just, cut the high frequencies. So first, let's just cover the frequency and the resonance. If I play something, we are just using the VCO number 1. I'm going to move this one, and we're going to start just cutting and chopping the high frequencies. We can see it right there. Now then you have the resonance, and it's just pretty not super aggressive cut. Now we can go up on the resonance, and what this does is going to create a peak right at the break point, right here. So if I go up, we can hear it really well. Right. So that's it, just a classic frequency and resonance. Now, with this synthesizer, you get different types of filters. It's just like a variable filter type. So if I play something, by default, you're going to be standing on low pass. So it means you cut the high frequencies. If you go all the way down, notice it says band pass. So the band pass is just going to be a band pass. And what it means is that you're going to be chopping the lows and the highs. So you're going to let the middle one. So if I do a resonance, we're going to expose that, and we can clearly see that we are doing chop, chop, and then just boosting right here. It's just a band pass, right? Pretty simple. Now, if I go to the other side, and I'm going to go over there. If I go right here, we are doing LP, which is the low pass. We are just chopping highs. Now, as soon as you keep moving forward, keep moving up, and you move towards the notch, you're going to be getting the notch. And you can see the notch right there. And as we get closer, we're going to get a notch. Now remember, with the notch, the resonance, it's really important. If this is all the way up, we get nothing, but we need to go down, and then we can adjust the notch with the frequency. Now, if you keep moving forward and you go towards the HP, you're going to be doing a combination of notch until you get to a high pass. And the high pass means that you're just chopping low frequencies. You're just chopping low ones and letting the highs pass. So with this filter, you just can, move around and just get different sounds, and you get different filters on the same one, on the same synthesizer, which is something super cool. Right, so then we have the modulation section. It's just going to be this part at the bottom, and you can modulate the frequency, this control, in pretty much two ways. You can do it with the envelope, which is dedicated to the VCF, and you can do it with an LFO, or you can do none. Right, so I'm going to start always from a default. I'm going to go to init, and what we want to do, we want to modulate the frequency in some fashion. In this case, I'm going to go to the LFO, and if I play something, nothing happens, right? So you need to decide right here how much you're going to be doing from this modulation, from the LFO, this source. Now on the LFO, I'm going to go up so we can have some, a rate, some speed. And we're going to go up. And as soon as I do it, what it's doing is just modulating this control up and down following the LFO1. Right? And if we add some resonance, we can really hear it. Now we go all the way up, it's going to be full modulation, but we can just fine-tune it and do just a little bit. Now if you go to the other side, you're going to be going into negatives, which is pretty much the same, it starts the other way. And again, you can go really aggressive, and that's pretty much it. Now usually the most common modulation for the frequency is going to be the envelope. So in this case, we can use the envelope number 2, and how it works the same way than the envelope number 1. So I'm going to be going down, and I want to play a key, and as soon as I play it, I want this to move up and then go down. Now, right now, the envelope, the attack, decay, sustain are all the way up, so if I play a key, nothing is going to happen. Now, first, we need to decide how much of that modulation, the envelope 2, we want. So I'm going to go all the way up in this case, so we can make it obvious. And notice that we get a click, and it's because everything is super short. So I want to move this up in some fashion and take some time to do it. So this is going to be the attack. How long it's going to take to move that knob up. So I'm going to play it. It's going to take this amount of time. It's going to go and do something like that. And then instantly it's going back, because remember that the decay is really short. So it goes back instantly. So if we want to go in a smoother way, we need to provide some decay. It's going to go up, and then it's going to go down to the original position, which is this one, right? So what we are doing something like this, and then we are doing something like this, right? Now, just like the envelope 1, if you want to sustain at some point, instead of going all the way down to this position, you just can add some sustain, and instead of going down, it's just going to sustain at some point. So it means that it's going all the way up, and instead of going all the way down, it's just sustaining at some part, because we are holding a key. And this is what it's going on right now. Right. So pretty standard, again, pretty common controls that you get on any given synthesizer. Subtractive synthesizer. Right. So this is how the envelope works, and you get two sources, the envelope and the LFO1, or the none. Right, so all this, so everything that we've been talking is just the classic controls that you get. Now we're going to start diving into the non-so-classic things. For example, you have the spread, and then you have the VCFMS. And this is something pretty unique to this synthesizer. So essentially what we can do, and I'm going to go back to an init, we can make the synthesizer or the oscillators mono, or we can make them full stereo. We can just spread them. So if I play the oscillator number 1, we can just really hear that it's just super mono, right? Just right in the center. If I move this control, we can hear that it goes wide. So what it's doing is just making it wide. That's all. If I go mono, stereo. Cool. So we can do the same thing with the other one. And the main point of doing all this, just lets me go right there. And I'm going to go maybe to a pulse. Why not? I can make it this one mono. And now the pulse is going to be on the stereo side. It just sounds really cool if you make the sound really wide. Now, of course, you can go into some in-betweens if it's just super wide, but this one gives you something else. It gives you this option. It's a VCF MS, mid and side. So essentially what you can do right here, you can filter or decide what you want to filter. If you're standing right in the middle on the VCF MS, on this, right in the 50%, I believe it's just 0 instead of 50%. When we cut the mono and the stereo one, or the side one, we are going to be cutting, for example, both oscillators, the one that it's right in the center and the one on the sides. Now, what happens if I go to the M or to the S? So if I go to the M, the synthesizer, what will do, it will cut frequencies, but it will not cut the other ones. So in this case, we are on M. As I move down, notice that something right here is happening. If I go up, we get more. So I'm cutting some frequencies. What am I cutting? Whatever we have on center. So since we have this VCO standing on the center, we are cutting the frequency or the sound that comes from this oscillator and letting the VCO number 2, which is the one on the sides, pass. So we are not affecting it by the frequency. Now if I go to the sides, now we are letting this one pass and we are cutting the square, the ones on the sides. And you can even modulate this to get different tones. Something like that. And again, this is something pretty funny that you get the synthesizer, and it's really cool. You can create really cool sounds just modulating all of these controls. So the next thing is going to be about the transpose, the voices, the TMT, and the unison, the section that we have right here at the bottom. So always starting from an init patch. And now if you don't have an init on favorites, you are going to be finding this on the synth and misc. And then right there at the bottom, maybe you don't see it, it says init. So you can get it from there. So okay, so we're going to start from init. And as soon as I play something, we can transpose it down and transpose everything up. Right? Pretty simple. I feel like I don't need to explain this. And on the init patch, right here, you're going to be standing on mono. Right? So it's always one single key at a time. This is the main nature of this synthesizer, but you can go and use many different voices. So you can do dual phonic, you can do 4, 6, 18, or 32. So I'm going to go to 16, why not? So when you have many voices, you can play chords. Right? So there we go. So we can just play up to 16 different voices. So if you wanted to do chords or, big pads, you can do it with this. Now, then at the bottom, this, of course, is, again, just pretty obvious. Now, then at the bottom, you have something called the TMT, and you have the unison. First, I'm going to be talking about unison. So when you go to unison and you enable on, if you don't know what unison is going to take all the available voices that you have right here, is going to stack on top of each other, all the different voices. This means that you can have a big sound. So by default, on other synthesizers, when you do this, you're going to be stacking, in this case, 8 voices at the same time when you play a key. Now, you're not going to be able to play chords. It's just a monophonic synthesizer, but you're going to be doing unison. So if I play one key, we're going to get that sound, that big sound, the unison sound. Right, so again, that's just the unison sound. Now, one thing that you cannot do on this synthesizer is to detune the voices, which is something you get by default on this one. On some other synthesizers, some other plugins, you can decide how much detuning you can do. On this one, I couldn't find a way to do it. Right. Now, when you use many voices, the TMT right here is pretty important. So by default, on different, on an analog synthesizer, when you have many voices, all the different voices are going to be a little bit, different from each other, right? So they're going to be a little bit different. So the TMT is going to emulate that. It's going to give you that analog vibe, right? So every little voice will be a little bit different. If you disable the TMT, all the voices are just exactly the same. So when you use unison, sometimes it's a little bit better to do the TMT on because all the voices are just a little bit different. So this LFO, the LFO1, can be, mono if we wanted to, but it can be also poly. And if you don't know what that means, it means that each single voice will get a version of the LFO number 1. Now, sometimes you don't get this, depends on the synthesizer. All the voices will be following the same LFO. And I'm going to give you an example. So we have 8 different voices, right? So I'm going to be doing some frequency modulation right here. I'm going to go to frequency and I'm going to use the LFO1. And we're going to do something and we're going to be modulating the frequency. I'm not going to use Unison. And I'm going to keep the TMT off for now. Just going to go to the off side. And we are doing some frequency modulation, right? We can see it right here on the oscilloscope and we can see it on the spectrum. Now I'm playing a single key. Now I'm going to be playing a second key, and since we have 8 voices, we can do that. Now notice that the 2 voices, both, are doing the same motion. And if I play a new key, a third one, all the voices are following the same LFO, so they all do the same thing. If I play 6 voices, all the different voices are moving along and following the instruction of the same LFO, so they move the same way, right? All the voices are doing the same. Now, this might be something really obvious, but on some synthesizers, when you have multiple voices, each single voice gets a version of the LFO. This is something normal. So when you go to the TMT and you turn it on, now each voice will have a version of the LFO. So now what happens is that when you play a key and then you add a new one and a new one and another one and another one, the LFO will start on different places for the different voices. Let me give you an example. I'm going to play one key, and we know that it's just going to do that. Now I'm going to be playing a second key in 3, 2, 1. Notice what happens. I'm playing 2 keys, so we are using 2 voices, and the voices are doing something differently. And I'm going to be playing a third key in 3, 2, 1. Notice they move differently, and it's because each voice, it's doing its own thing. It's following its own instruction of the LFO1, its own version. I'm going to be playing one more, and you're going to start getting this mess, of sound, this wall of sound. So this is what happens when you have the TMT on, and this is what it means LFO, the LFO1 is polyphonic. So back to an initial patch, right here we have the different options, pretty simple options. You have your overall volume, you can go up, you can go down. You have your portamento. So if you play one single key, it's going to glide to the next note, right? I'm going to be playing a key, and every time I play a key, it's gliding or sliding to the next note. Pretty simple. Now, right here you have legato on. This works in mono the best. So when I play a key now, notice that it's just not gliding. It's just not sliding. And on this one, it is. So what's the difference? Now, the difference is that you need to be holding a key in order to do some sliding, some portamento. So if I play a key and I'm holding it, and now I'm going to be playing a new key while I'm still holding the previous one, then it's going to do the gliding, the portamento. And I release it, and it glides back to the one I was holding. And I'm playing pretty much one key. I'm playing 2 keys now. It's going to glide. I'm going to release it while I'm still holding the other one. So this means that when legato is on, you need to press a key and hold it. And when you play a new one, then it's going to glide. If not, it's not going to glide. And then, pretty simple, you have your pitch bend. So when I play a key, and I'm using, of course, a MIDI controller, I'm going up on the pitch bend wheel, and we go down. So right here, you can decide how much down and how much up you can go. And by default, it's 12 semitones up, so which is going to be 1 octave up or 1 octave down. Right, so I'm back to an initial patch, and we need to cover this section, the one we have right here. So if we go to effects, I'm not going to go through the effects because it's pretty simple. You have a chain right here. You can change the chain. You can modify the position of the effects, but it's very simple. You have a chorus, you have a distortion, a flanger, a reverb, a delay, and an air band, which is going to be a boost on the high frequencies. I'm not going to deep dive on this. I'm going to go straight to the ARP. So if I play something on the ARP, when you enable it, and I play a chord, in this case I'm just playing a minor, Right, it's just gonna do it. I'm gonna go to the envelope and just bring the sustain down and do a little bit of sustain. So I want something more staccato, so it's a little bit easier to hear. Something like that. All right, maybe a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Just adjusting so you can hear something nicer. All right, so that's cool. So the first thing we need to talk about on the ARP is going to be the play modes. So the first one, it's pretty simple, is the most common one that you get, is the as played. So the as played, it means that it's going to take into account which the order of the notes that you're entering, you're playing, and it's going to do that. There's no special order like the other ones. So if I play one key, the low one, I play a higher key, now it's going to be the low and the high, and now if I play a higher key, it's going to remember the order. And it's going to just respect that. It's not going to do whatever it wants, just going to follow whatever you did, the order of the keys. So, that's how it works. Now, the other modes are not, like that. They're not, they don't care about what you're doing or the order of the keys or the notes. So this one, the first one is going to be up. If I make a triad, it's going to be up, right? It's going to go up. Now, the next one is going to be down, right? Pretty simple. Now, this one is going to be up and down. Just up and down. And I'm making a triad, so it's 3 different notes, up and down. Now, the next one is still up and down, but it's going to repeat the last note. Right? Pretty simple. Now, if I go to this one, it's pretty much the same as this, but this one is going to be down and up instead of up and down. So it's the same, but the opposite. And this one is the same as this, but the opposite. It's going to repeat the last note, but the main nature of this is down and up instead of up and down. Now this is going to be the chord. Now the thing is that to do with this, we have a mono. So we have mono amount of voices. So this is just not going to work. So you need to do more voices. So if I play a chord, now it's going to, repeat the chord I'm playing. And then lastly, you have the random, and the random is just pretty simple. I'm just gonna play random notes. It just if I play 6 notes, in this case, I have maybe right here. I'm gonna go back to mono. I'm gonna be playing 6 notes. It's going to play randomly through those 6 notes. Pretty understandable. Now I'm gonna go back to this one. You have the divider, so as soon as you change it, it's going to go slower in this case. And you just change the divisions and you can go faster or slower, depends on what you want to do. So this is the clock, right? And by default is synced to whatever BPM you have on your DAW. And the next one is just going to be, let me do 16s. That's fine. So I'm going to go to swing. And the swing is just going to give you some swing. Right. Now, all of this, the clock and the different modes, it's just pretty simple to understand. All right, so I'm going to go back to 1/16. Now, we need to talk about this section, and this has something interesting. So, right now, the octave, it means that if you play something on 1 octave, right, on a very specific octave, let's say C3, is going to repeat it 1 octave up, then 2 up, 3 up, or 4 up. Now, the thing is that right here, it says as played. Now, if I toggle this off, it's going to go off, but then it's going to go on. And this means that, it's not, you cannot disable it. The default mode is going to be whatever it is that you're playing. So if I play a triad, this is the as played, the default. Now, if I enable this, it's going to do whatever I'm playing, and then it's going to repeat it 1 octave up. If I disable, just 1 single octave, the octave I'm playing, and the next octave up. If I disable this one now it's being disabled. It's playing the same thing I'm doing, but it's just doing it 1 octave higher. So if I go to this, to the 2, I'm actually playing this arpeggio 2 octaves lower, but it's doing it 2 octaves higher. Now, this is not super common on all the synthesizers. On all the synthesizers, what you can do is that you play on your octave, and then you're going to be repeating 1 octave higher, then 2 octaves higher, then you're going to be repeating 3, and then 4. Right? Pretty simple. I'm just making a triad. Now, On this one, again, it's super interesting that you can disable the in-between. On other synthesizers, you cannot do it. You just go in order. You do all or you do nothing. So I can, for example, play my octave, the one I'm playing right now, and just repeat the one I'm playing and the one that it's looping or repeating 4 octaves up, which is pretty cool. So this again can give you some very cool sounds. Right? So again, you don't get it on a lot of synthesizers, and it's just a good thing that you have it right here. And I would love to see this function, this idea on other synthesizers. So then you have the trigger section. Now, if I go to hold, this one is very simple. If I do play a chord, it's just gonna remember, and I'm not playing it, I'm not holding the keys, it's just gonna hold it for you. And this is really cool because you just have 2 hands free now. You don't need to hold the keys on your MIDI controller. Now you can adjust the values and just decide what you're gonna do, right? If you click on hold, it's just gonna forget what you did and you need to do it again. So if I hold it and play a try it, it's just gonna repeat it. Pretty simple. Right, so then you have a trigger and it says legato and every note. And this is just a little bit confusing. So legato, it means that it will not restart when you add notes. Right? And then the every note, it means that when you add a note, it's going to restart. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. So if I'm playing a key, one single key, it's just going to do that. And right now we have the legato, which means it will not restart. I play 2 keys, I play 3 keys, and every time I add keys, notice it's just not restarting. It's just like adding it to whatever is I'm holding, and I'm holding like 7 keys right now. It's not restarting. Now the other one will restart. So if I play 1, I play 2, it restarts. We cannot hear it because it's just 2 notes. But if I play a new one, it restarts. I'm gonna be playing a new one on 3, 2, 1. It restarts. And every time I add new keys, it restarts the whole arpeggio. So it depends on what you want to do. This is useful, right? So again, this is all the thing that you don't get on a lot of synthesizers. Okay, so I'm going to start in an initial patch, and we need to talk about pretty much the last thing we're going to be covering, which is super important, highly important for this synthesizer, which is the modulation matrix. Now, at the first glance, when you look at the synthesizer, it's just not very complex, but then if you take a look, you have 9 modulation slots, so you can go crazy with this synthesizer. Okay, so right here, we're going to talk about this in a minute, but right there you have your modulation source. You have 9, of course. You have your modulation source. It's the who is going to be doing the modulation. And then at the bottom, you have your destination, which is the what is going to be modulated. So let's say that we want to modulate it with, I don't know, the LFO2. We're going to talk about the LFO2 in a minute, but if I go to the LFO2, we're going to do some modulation with the number 2. Then we need to go right there at the bottom and select what we want to modulate. Let's say that we want to move the frequency of the oscillator number 1, something easy that we can, recognize and hear. And if I do something, nothing happens. And it's because you need to enable them. You need to click the number of the, the modulation. And if I play something, it's just doing whatever the LFO instructs. So if I go faster, it's just going to go faster. And if I change it to a square, it's going to do a square or saw. We're going to talk about that in a minute. It's just pretty understandable. Now, right here, you have your attenuator. So right now, it's going all the way down. It means that you're just doing the full of the LFO2 to the VCO1 frequency. So if I do less, the modulation is just going to be a mild modulation. So this is your attenuator. Now you're going into negatives. You can go into positives and go all the way aggressive, or just you can do a tiny little bit. Depends on, of course, what you want to do. Now you have a lot of destinations. For example, you can select the mod wheel and you can do, something else. Like, for example, the VCO frequency, why not? I'm going to be playing something. And if I go up on my modulation wheel, it's just going to go and do it. So yeah, you have a lot of destinations, the mod wheel, the envelopes, the pitch bend, the aftertouch, and so on, even the velocity. Right, so you choose a source and then a destination. Pretty understandable, pretty easy to understand. And again, you have 9 of this, so you can go really crazy. Now, I'm going to go back to a default patch right there. And we need to talk about the linear or all the other options, the parabolic, the square root, and so on and so on. So right now, I'm going to go to maybe, let's go to an LFO2. Let's do the same thing. I'm going to maybe go to a VCO1 frequency. And if I play something, of course we need to enable this. It's going to do that modulation. I'm going to go faster. Right? So we're doing full of the LFO2 to the frequency of the VCO number 1. So it's linear. So it means as soon as we play it, this is going to kick in and it's doing it on a linear fashion. Now, what happens if I change it to the other ones? Now, this one is going to be parabolic, so it means that it's going to start on a kind of a slow way, and then it's going to go faster when we reach towards the end. So if I play it, it's going to be very noticeable. Notice the motion is really different. If I change it back to linear, it's just up and down, up and down. And this one has like a swing, like a motion. It's fast and slow. Fast and slow. Now the square root is the opposite. It's fast first and then slow. Then we have this one. And again, we can really see it right here in the oscilloscope. It has a different motion than the other ones. And if I go to the cubic one, it's again pretty similar to the other one, but to the sigmoid, but it's just a different motion. It's like 2 steps, right? And this is, again, a very nice addition. On all these different synthesizers, you don't get this option, which is, something cool that you get it right here. So you can add a different motion to whatever is that you're doing. So that's it. There's nothing else we need to talk about. This is actually pretty simple. You choose your source, your destination, the type, whether it's going to be linear or whatever you want to use, and then you enable the modulation, and then kaboom, you do it. Now, there's one more thing that we need to discuss, which is going to be the LFO2. We never talked about this, and it's just pretty simple. Since we have it already connected right here, I'm going to be using it. So you have your rate control. And as you have on the LFO1, with the LFO1, you can go in hertz. We can see it right there. On this one, you can sync it to your DAW BPM. So now it's going to go into divisions. Right? It's just a little bit more precise. Also, you can do a sine, you can do a square, which is the on-off type of sound, or you can do a saw. Right. Now, the next is going to be the retrigger, which means that what happens if you play a key. So in this case, I'm going to maybe just disable this. And I'm going to be doing something like this. I'm always going to be tapping the same key over and over, right? Just tapping it. And I'm going to enable this. Notice what happens. Now, I'm going to be just disabling the retrigger. So sometimes it's going to be the pitch is going to be up and down, and I'm tapping the same key. And it's because behind the scenes, the LFO doesn't care that we are just playing a key. It's just, doing the square LFO, and sometimes it's going to be up, and sometimes it's going to be down, right? It doesn't care I'm playing a key. Now, the retrigger, it means that every time I play a key, the square in this case is going to always start on the initial position, which might be, in this case, up instead of down. So every time we play a new key, it's just going to be starting on the same place. But if I press and hold, then the modulation will just, follow its course. Now, this is not just with the square. We have it with, the sine wave. If I do the same thing, we always start from the same place. Same thing with the saw. And if I hold it, then we have that motion. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Hopefully you learned something. This synthesizer, it's not maybe so challenging anymore, and you understand how to use it right now, and you can freely use it. So if you liked all of this, remember to like and subscribe. And if you have the money and you want to buy me a coffee, you can go to the links at the description. You have Patreon, you have PayPal, you have YouTube. Thanks. All right, so see you on the next one.